It was a cold evening, and a mother and her child were left standing on the street, helpless as taxi after taxi passed them by. The woman's hands were shaking from the cold, and her child was bundled in a worn-out blanket. Just when it seemed like no one cared, a luxury car pulled up beside them. But the real surprise came when the door opened and the driver stepped out, Keanu Reeves. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a charity event. It was a simple, human act of kindness. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Watch as Keanu, without a second thought, offers them a ride, showing us all the true power of compassion. This unexpected act of heroism proves that sometimes the biggest heroes don't wear capes. They drive luxury cars. Don't miss the incredible moment when one celebrity proves that kindness can change everything. The cold evening descended upon the city, with the dim light from the street lamps barely illuminating the empty sidewalks. A woman with a small child stood at a bus stop, desperately trying to hail a taxi. Her hands trembled from the cold, and her child, wrapped in an old, tattered blanket, huddled closely against her. The exhaustion in their eyes was evident, and the feeling of helplessness hung in the air like a thick fog. It was a moment of deep despair, a sense of being invisible in a world too busy to care. The woman stretched her hand out toward passing taxis, her fingers numb from the cold, but each one sped by without so much as a glance in her direction. Her heart sank each time a car passed, the hope that had flickered briefly with each wave of her hand, growing fainter with each failed attempt. The child's eyes were wide with confusion, not fully understanding the weight of the situation, but sensing the tension in the air. The woman's face, already weary, now bore a look of quiet frustration and helplessness. The city seemed to ignore them both, the noise of the streets surrounding them like a distant echo that only magnified their isolation. Minutes stretched on, and the woman's posture sagged further, her body and mind both growing weaker from the cold and the relentless rejection. Then, finally, a taxi slowed down and pulled up. Her heart jumped with a spark of hope. She stepped forward quickly, the child still close to her side, and extended her hand, eager to seize the opportunity. But as the cab's door opened, the driver took one look at them and immediately shook his head, a dismissive motion that crushed the small amount of hope she had left. Without a word, he slammed the door shut and drove off, the tires screeching on the wet pavement as he disappeared into the night. The woman stood frozen in place, her mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Her eyes followed the taxi as it vanished, the world around her suddenly feeling colder, more indifferent. She didn't know what to do anymore, the weight of the situation pressing down on her like a physical force. She tried again, raising her hand weakly, but the exhaustion in her body had now matched the hopelessness in her heart. She could no longer bring herself to believe that anyone would stop. The chill in the air bit into her skin, and the child, now shivering, clung to her tightly. The woman looked down at the little one, her heart breaking at the sight of their shared misery. The child's innocent face was full of confusion, but there was a quiet understanding in their eyes, an understanding that this wasn't how it was supposed to be, that their needs, their simple human need for warmth and care, were being dismissed by the world around them. And as the cold deepened, it was as though her entire body was encased in ice. She felt invisible, as though the world had turned its back on them. She glanced around again, hoping for some miracle, but the streets were empty, save for the distant hum of passing cars, each one a reminder of how far out of reach any hope seemed to be. The woman's chest tightened, and a bitter taste of defeat filled her mouth. She was stuck, caught in a cycle of rejection, with no one to help, no way to escape the cold. Her only companion was the little one, whose tiny hand was now holding onto hers with a desperate grip. It wasn't just the cold of the night that was overwhelming, but the coldness of the world around her, the indifference that seemed to seep from every corner of the city. She wanted to believe in the kindness of strangers, to think that someone, anyone, would stop and offer help. But with each passing moment, that belief faded. It felt as though the world had forgotten them, leaving them stranded on the edge of a cold, uncaring reality. And yet, as she stood there, the sound of an approaching car broke the stillness. It wasn't just any car. This one slowed down, coming closer, and finally stopping in front of her. At that moment, the woman couldn't help but glance up, her heart still cautious but pulsing with the faintest glimmer of hope. This time, maybe, just maybe, things would be different. The silence of the cold evening was suddenly broken by the sound of a car pulling up behind the woman and her child. She turned her head, her breath catching for a moment as she looked at the vehicle in front of her. It wasn't just any car. It was a luxury car, sleek and polished, the kind that seemed out of place on the dark, empty street. The headlights shone brightly, casting an unexpected glow on the scene, as if the world itself had decided to pause, offering a fleeting chance of something different. The car came to a stop, the engine humming quietly before the door opened. To her disbelief, the man who stepped out of the car was none other than Keanu Reeves. His presence was calm, almost serene, standing tall yet approachable. There was no rush in his movements, no urgency to get anywhere. His gaze met hers, and in that fleeting moment their eyes locked. In his eyes, there was no judgment, no pity for her situation, just quiet confidence and an unspoken understanding. It was the kind of look that instantly made her feel seen, not as an inconvenience or problem, but simply as a person, someone worthy of help. Without a word, Keanu opened the passenger door of his car, his hand gesturing in a soft but inviting motion. His actions were gentle and deliberate, a silent offer of assistance. The woman stood frozen for a split second, still unsure if what was happening was real. Her mind raced to process the situation, unable to grasp the sudden shift in her fate. She had been standing on the streets, feeling invisible, rejected, and cold, and now, in front of her, was someone offering her a way out, a chance to escape the harshness of the moment. She stepped forward cautiously, almost as if she were in a dream, unsure if this was happening or if she was imagining it. Her legs moved slowly, her feet dragging as if weighed down by the exhaustion of the night. The cold had sunk deep into her bones, but the warmth from the car, from his presence, was undeniable. She reached the car door, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on the handle. The realization hit her in waves. This wasn't just any person offering help. This was Keanu Reeves, the actor, the man she had seen on the screen countless times, now standing before her in a moment that could change everything. Keanu didn't rush her. He simply waited for her to process what was happening. As she hesitated, unsure of what to do next, he leaned in slightly, his body language kind and patient. She noticed how he didn't impose, didn't pressure her into making a decision. Instead, he allowed her to make the choice herself, offering only a soft but meaningful nod of encouragement. This gesture, simple as it was, gave her the courage to open the door. With careful movements, Keanu stepped aside and helped the woman gently guide her child into the car. He didn't rush her, didn't make any demands, just quietly ensuring the child was settled in safely. His hands were steady, his presence calm, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. There was no awkwardness, no discomfort in the air, just a quiet understanding that this was the right thing to do. The woman's heart fluttered in her chest, her eyes blinking rapidly as she adjusted to this unexpected kindness. Once the child was in the car, Keanu carefully closed the door behind her, making sure she was secure inside. He didn't wait for any formal thanks or acknowledgement. His focus was entirely on helping, and that was enough for him. He moved around the car to the driver's side with the same quiet confidence, opening the door and slipping into the seat. The woman, still in a daze, stood for a moment, watching him with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. It was as though the world had shifted just for a moment, offering her a rare gift she hadn't expected to receive. As the car door clicked shut behind Keanu, the woman took a deep breath, the weight of the cold lifting from her shoulders. The chill she had been carrying inside, the sense of being trapped in an unyielding world, began to dissipate. For the first time that evening, she felt warmth, not just from the heater in the car, but from the simple act of someone treating her like a person, not a problem. As Keanu started the engine and the car began to move, she allowed herself to relax for the first time in hours. The constant fear of rejection, the worry for her child, had been momentarily silenced by the kindness of a stranger. And in that moment, the world seemed just a little less harsh, a little more bearable. Keanu drove in silence, his attention focused on the road ahead, but his demeanor remained calm and kind. He wasn't there for attention or recognition. He was simply offering the help that he felt was right. The woman, now able to take a breath of relief, looked out the window as the city passed by, still processing what had just happened. She wasn't sure how this had come to be, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like there was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, kindness could make a difference in a world that often felt indifferent to those in need. The car glided smoothly through the quiet, dimly lit streets of the city. The hum of the engine was soft, almost serene, filling the silence that now existed inside the vehicle. It was a silence that was no longer heavy or suffocating, but peaceful, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere from just moments before. The woman sat in the back seat, her child curled up next to her, his tiny head resting against her chest. She could feel the warmth of his body, and she instinctively pulled him closer, the security of the moment wrapping around them both. For the first time that evening, she felt like she could breathe, as if the world outside had ceased its harsh judgment. Keanu sat in the driver's seat, his focus steady on the road ahead. His hands gripped the wheel lightly, his posture relaxed but alert. His gaze, calm and resolute, was fixed on the dark streets stretching out before him. There was no hurry in his movements, no urgency to get anywhere. His pace was unhurried, as if time itself had slowed, allowing the journey to unfold at its own pace. He drove with a quiet confidence, not needing to rush or prove anything. In this moment, the road was his sole focus, but there was a deeper calm that emanated from him, a sense of purpose, a reassurance that nothing was more important than the people in the car with him. The soft glow from the streetlights outside painted fleeting shadows on the car's interior as they passed, casting gentle reflections on the windows. The city around them was calm, but still, the hum of urban life lingered in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond the car. Yet within this small, confined space, it felt like time had taken on a new meaning. The journey, once just a means to an end, had transformed into something far more significant. It was no longer about reaching a destination quickly, but about the shared experience, the silent connection between the people in the car, and the quiet gesture of kindness that had set it all in motion. The woman's gaze shifted toward the rearview mirror, where she could see Keanu's face reflected in the glass. His features were calm and collected, his expression unwavering, but there was something in his eyes, something that conveyed a depth of understanding, an empathy that reached beyond the surface. His presence was quiet, but it carried with it a sense of peace. In that moment, the woman felt a subtle shift within herself. She had been accustomed to feeling invisible, to being dismissed by the world, but here, with Keanu at the wheel, she was reminded that there were people who saw beyond the external circumstances. He didn't just see her as someone in need of help. He saw her as a person, as a human being deserving of kindness. That recognition, even without words, was more comforting than she had anticipated. Her eyes drifted down to her child, still nestled against her, fast asleep in her arms. His tiny face was peaceful, free from the anxiety and cold of earlier. The woman's heart softened at the sight of him, and she gently brushed a strand of hair away from his face. His breathing was steady, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to relax, knowing that they were safe, that for now, they had found a brief reprieve from the harshness of the world. The road outside might have been endless, but inside the car, in this small space, they were protected. They were no longer just two people stranded on the side of the road, abandoned by the world. Now, they were part of something different, a simple act of kindness that had led them here. She couldn't help but watch Keanu as he drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze unwavering. There was a quiet strength in him, a strength that wasn't loud or brash but rooted in compassion and care. It wasn't the kind of heroism that made headlines or was applauded by the masses, but it was the kind of heroism that made a difference in the lives of individuals in small, profound ways. As the woman watched him, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She hadn't expected to find solace in a stranger, let alone in someone so well known. But here he was offering something that was more valuable than any material possession. He was offering humanity, respect, and empathy. The moments passed quietly, the car's smooth movement through the streets becoming a backdrop to the unspoken connection that had developed between them. The woman's mind, which had been so consumed with worry and fear, began to slow down. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to simply be in the moment, without the weight of the world pressing down on her. The only thing that mattered now was the simple, profound act of being seen, of being treated with respect and kindness. The city continued to pass by outside the windows, but the car remained a small, safe bubble where the noise of the world couldn't touch them. The woman, with her child nestled beside her, felt a quiet sense of peace settle in her chest. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from solving all of life's problems, but the kind that came from knowing that, for this brief moment, they were okay. They were more than okay. They were worthy of help, worthy of kindness. And that realization was a gift in itself. Keanu continued to drive, his focus on the road ahead, but the energy in the car had changed. It was no longer just a ride. It had become a quiet moment of refuge, a space where the simple act of helping had transformed a difficult evening into a reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world. And though the journey was not yet over, the woman knew that no matter where they ended up, this moment, this kindness, would stay with her for a long time. The car rolled slowly to a stop in front of the woman's home. The street was quiet, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Keanu's hands relaxed on the wheel as he looked out the window, his gaze soft and steady. He didn't rush, didn't make any hurried movements. There was no rush to leave, no urgency to break the connection that had been formed, even in such a short time. He remained in the car for a moment, ensuring that everything was settled before he finally opened the door. The woman had already begun to gather her child, carefully lifting the little one from the back seat, her movements slow but deliberate. Keanu remained still, watching them, and when the woman stepped out of the car with the child in her arms, he didn't immediately drive away. He stayed, watching, making sure they were both on solid ground. The woman carefully adjusted her grip on the child, the weight of the moment settling in. She was no longer just a woman in need. She had become a mother taking care of her child, someone who had been seen and helped when everything seemed hopeless. Keanu stepped out of the car to close the door for her, making sure everything was secure. His actions were quiet, thoughtful. There was no rush to go, no feeling of obligation. It wasn't about how quickly he could leave, but rather about ensuring the woman and her child were okay. He closed the door softly, locking the vehicle behind him with a quick motion. The sound of the lock clicking was the only noise in the quiet street, and it seemed to mark the end of their brief journey together, but it didn't feel final. He turned back toward the woman, giving her a small, silent nod as he slowly walked back to his car. His gesture wasn't flashy or grand. There was no fanfare, no sweeping goodbye. He didn't need to say anything more. His presence, his willingness to help, had already spoken volumes. The woman stood there, clutching her child in her arms, watching him for a moment longer. The words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. She wanted to thank him, to express the depth of her gratitude, but the weight of the moment was too much. She simply nodded back at him, her eyes filled with silent thanks. There was no need for loud words or exaggerated gestures. Keanu had done what needed to be done in the quietest, most respectful way. His actions had not been about making a statement to the world or drawing attention to himself. They had been about recognizing someone's need and responding with care without expecting anything in return. For the woman, this was not just a simple ride home. It was a moment of being seen, of being treated with dignity when the world had so easily ignored her. As Keanu climbed back into his car, The woman's gaze lingered on him for a moment. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but this brief encounter would stay with her forever. It wasn't just that he had helped her, it was how he had helped. His calmness, his respect for her situation, and his quiet acknowledgement of her humanity made this act of kindness stand out in a way that words never could. Keanu settled back into the driver's seat, his face relaxed but thoughtful. The car engine hummed softly as he shifted it into gear and began to pull away. But this wasn't just a casual departure. It wasn't just another car ride. There was a quiet change in the air, a sense of purpose that lingered. Keanu wasn't just leaving. He was leaving behind something important, an example of how one small act could ripple out and change the energy of the world, even if only for a moment. As he drove away, he didn't feel the need to look back. The kindness he had offered had been simple, unspoken, but profound. It wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about recognizing the humanity in others and offering what little help he could, without the expectation of anything in return. There was no applause or acknowledgement. There was just a feeling, an unspoken connection between two people who, for a fleeting moment, had shared something important. For the woman, Keanu's actions would remain etched in her memory. It wasn't the material help that mattered most. It was the reminder that there was still goodness in the world. In a time when kindness could seem rare, Keanu had provided a quiet, powerful example of what it means to act with integrity and empathy. His simple gesture had reaffirmed something she had almost lost sight of, that even in a world full of strangers, some people still see others as they are, human, deserving of compassion, and worthy of care. As Keanu's car disappeared into the distance, the quiet night returned to the street. The woman stood for a moment, holding her child, feeling the weight of the kindness she had just received. She didn't need anything more. What she had received was enough. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was the kind of kindness that changes people not through spectacle, but through genuine, quiet care. And in that moment, she understood that even the smallest act of humanity could leave a lasting impact on someone's life.